I'm sure there'll be a few stragglers coming in after having gone to our original venue and then realizing it's been changed, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming out on a Saturday afternoon to learn about a very important topic in the medical cannabis industry here in Mississippi. My name is Henry Chrysler. I am the director of the Mississippi Medical Marijuana Association, otherwise known as 3MA. For those of you who may not know who we are, 3MA is Mississippi's largest 501c6 political organization representing the interests of the medical cannabis industry. We are composed of licensed cannabis operators, as well as businesses that offer ancillary services and products to cannabis businesses. And we work together to advocate for meaningful changes to the laws and regulations surrounding our program, to expand access to more patients, and to reduce the stigma surrounding cannabis as medicine. As most of you are aware, I'm sure if you showed up here today, you're well aware that the Department of Health adopted new rules and regulations surrounding yeast and mold testing on cannabis and cannabis flower back in January. It goes into effect October 29th. So we're here today to hear from some leading experts from across the country that are involved in providing services and machines to cannabis operators to help mitigate mold and yeast issues. I want to preface this event by saying this: 3MA is well aware of the difference of opinions surrounding these new regulations and the different methods of remediation that are on offer and that might be discussed here today. I want to please ask each of you to keep your personal opinions and criticisms about different methods of remediation or these regulations to yourselves for this event. These people have traveled from all across the country to speak to us today, so I want us to give them their full attention and go into this event without any preconceived notions about UV remediation or ozone remediation or anything like that. I hope you guys will listen with your full attention and give them the respect that they deserve. Our time is pretty limited here this afternoon, and we got a lot of presenters to go through, so I'm not going to take up too much time, but I did want to thank each of you guys for coming out here on a Saturday. I hope it's cool enough in this warehouse. We're not all sweating by the end of this. I want to thank Cathead Distillery for having us out here on such short notice. Please patronize their bar while you're here. I don't think they're actually open yet. I don't know if y'all have made any announcement about when you will be open to the public, but be sure to check their social medias and their website to find out when will actually be open. I want to thank members of the Department of Health for coming and attending this event. There will be a 30-minute questions and answers portion at the end for any questions that any of you might have for our presenters or for the Department of Health. We also have members from Alchemy Analytics, the licensed testing lab in Meridian. They're here to answer any questions you guys might have about testing for mold and yeast. But I'm no expert, so please don't ask me anything about mitigation. That's why I've asked these people to be here, because they're a lot smarter than me about this stuff. But without further ado, I would like to ask our first presenter to come up, Mr. Adams of XR Pure. XR Pure is one of the leading sources of UV remediation machines across the U.S. And I think he has 1 or 2 clients already here in Mississippi, so he's a good person to talk to about UV remediation. So I'm gonna give it away to him.
I fixed that now, haven't I? Sorry, a little more comfortable walking around down here. Grateful for all of you that have come. Thankful to have been invited here today. We're actually, to correct that a little bit, we're actually an X-ray remediation company. I'll talk to you about that. My presentation today is meant to be very informational, right? And then you want to know more about us and how we do things and all that, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. But try to just present as much information as I can. So Henry's going to advance slides for me. So we go to the next slide. We're here to talk about contamination in cannabis, which is a topic that nobody likes, right? Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to pay for it. We get it, but unfortunately, it's a fact of life. You're in a humid environment. The conditions that are good for growing cannabis are good for growing microbes, and so we have to deal with it. One thing to mention here is compare the regulations that are here in Mississippi. So total yeast and mold count, you have to be below 10,000. That is a very common number around the country. Many states around the country enforce that 10,000. Another one is total coliform. So in Mississippi, it's 100 CFU or less. That's quite strict. In Nevada, where our factory is, it's 1,000. And so that's a fairly strict regulation. Also, then you can't have any Aspergillus, E. coli, or Salmonella found in your product. Usually Aspergillus is the one that's more difficult to keep out of your grow. The other two aren't as much of a problem. So besides what I'm going to talk about today, our website has a bunch of blogs that talk about different kinds of ways, things that you can do, front end, controlling humidity, controlling your airflow, all kinds of things like that, cleanliness of your employees, all of those things. There's articles on our blog that can help with information on that. So my agenda today. So first of all, I want to talk about the benefits of X-ray decontamination. How does it work? Is it going to make my weed radioactive, right? That's the big question. That's what everybody wants to know. And we'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about what are the dosing guidelines. How much do you give for which different situations? And what should your SOP be? What is the stage in your process where you should apply remediation? Then if you do end up getting a machine, you've got to register that machine in Mississippi. So we'll talk about the process of how you do that, what the forms you need to do and the steps there. Then I'll have one slide on just XR Pure technology. How do we do it? How have we approached our machine? And there's a service here in Mississippi that is offering remediation as a service. And I'm just going to mention those guys. So let's go ahead. Okay, so X-ray decontamination. The nice thing about X-ray, the biggest thing is it will fully penetrate your flower. You fully penetrate what you're treating inside the machine, right? Just like a medical X-ray will pass right through your arm, X-rays inside the machine are going to pass all the way through the flower and fully treat it. Everything that's in that volume will get treated. That means that you can also treat something that's in its final packaging. Most people don't do that, which is what we'll talk about, but you can treat pre-rolls, you can treat trim, you can treat things in final packaging, even in jars and things like that, if you want to do it that way. It's controllable and tunable. So depending on how contaminated or not contaminated your product is, when it goes into there, we can adjust the machine to do more remediation, less remediation. The nice thing about X-ray is it really has little to no effect on your flower. I can send you data that we have collected before and after tests, testing through the machine. Within the variability of the test, the accuracy of the test itself, we really can't see any difference that X-ray makes on the product. So you got good stuff coming in, you'll have good stuff coming out afterwards, other than the microbes will be dead. With this machine, there's no chemicals, there's no residue, there's no motion, there's no tumbling of your product, so your trichomes stay intact. No heating. And so you're not going to decarboxylate, you're not going to burn your product, you're not going to ruin it. And also it's going to extend your shelf life, right? So if you kill mold before you package it, you put it in a clean package, it's going to stay clean. Nobody's going to open that package a month or 2 months later and find a moldy bud in there, right? That this will take care of that. So a little comment on capacity of our machine. So our machine is built so you can put 15 to 20 pounds of dried cannabis flower in the tray at one time, and you can treat that in about 2.5 hours. So if you were to run it back to back to back for 24 hours, you could do a little more than 130 pounds in one day. Okay. So how does X-ray sterilization work? I'm sure some of the other people that come behind me might talk a little more about the science, how it all works. There's an analogy that I like to use that I think is very descriptive about how it works, and hopefully will help you understand that. So go ahead. So with this analogy, let's just pretend that an X-ray is the size of a pin or a needle. Okay, on that kind of scale, next one, one mold spore would be approximately the size of a golf ball. Okay, and then you compare that to the size of just one plant cell in a plant, and that would be about the size of a pickup truck, so approximately 15 feet in diameter. And there are billions and billions of plant cells in one plant. So you can see just how tiny the X-rays are. The interesting thing about the X-ray and the size of that is it's almost exactly the size of a DNA strand that is within those mold spores. If we can go to the next slide. And so and one more. So as the X-ray comes to that DNA strand, it's just the right size for that DNA to absorb the energy from the X-ray. And one more slide. And then once the energy is released, it breaks apart that DNA strand. And so that is how it kills microbes. And because those X-rays are so tiny compared to plant cells, it does very little, has very little effect on the plant cells, and it's targeted towards the DNA of the microbes. It's not actually going to take your mold away. If you have mold on your flower, it can't physically remove the mold. What it does is stop it from continuing to grow. Okay, if that makes sense. So is my weed radioactive when I'm done? The simple answer, there's a lot on the internet. If you go out there, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions on that. I mean, the simple answer is no, right? An X-ray is just another form of electromagnetic radiation, just like visible light. It's a higher frequency, smaller wavelength, but it acts a lot like visible light. So just in your house, when you turn off the light switch, the light is gone. With an X-ray machine, you turn off the power to the X-ray, it is gone. There's nothing left in your product. There's nothing, hung over there that could hurt anybody. It does its job, and when it's off, it's gone. I want to talk just a little bit about that idea, though, is that there's a lot of controversy about people that say if we do use X-ray or even another remediation technique, we don't want to disclose it on our packaging, right? Because it scares consumers. And I understand that idea. Our thought about that is actually, if you should advertise the fact that you use a radiation. That makes sure that your product is clean. You can guarantee your customers that they're getting a clean product. So that should make you a premium brand. If you're using X-ray and you're advertising that you're doing that, you're giving a very clean and good product, especially for somebody who's using it for medical purposes. They're very aware of that, want to make sure that they're getting good stuff. Okay, how much dose should you give? X-ray energy or X-ray dose is measured in grays. A very typical dose for cannabis is 2,000 grays. Okay, so like I said, in our machine, that's about a 2.5-hour treatment. Something that is very contaminated, you might want to do 2,500 or 3,000 grays. Or many people, once they have their process under control, they have a lot of their cleanliness procedures under control. They will just do kind of a maintenance dose, maybe 700 or 800 grays. You can do that in an hour or less. And just kind of as an insurance policy that you make sure if any contamination got in there, you're going to take care of it quickly and that you won't have any failures of your testing. As far as the process goes, then when do you do remediation? For most people then, they would, harvest their cannabis, dry it, bucket, trim it, all of that. Once you have your finished flower, which you would otherwise be ready to send for testing, that's the point when you want to do the decontamination. Get it at that point, put it in clean sealed containers, in turkey bags, whatever you use to do that. And then it'll stay clean. Send your test off. Test is good, you're good to sell. Okay, if you want to register a machine in Mississippi, this is how you do it. And I can provide this information to anybody that needs it. But this website, you go on the website of the Department of Health, and you need to register application for registration of ionizing radiation device. That's what it's called on the website. It's only $145, but there are some requirements there that you have to comply with. And this is the same for any kind of doctor's office, dental office, they all have to do the same. But you've got to provide information about what site the machine is at and information about the machine. You need to have a safety evaluation, which in other words is a survey, which means that once the machine is running at full power, somebody comes with a radiation meter and makes sure that there's no radiation coming out of the machine. That's called a survey. Then depending on the results of that survey, if they find stuff that's coming out, they might require personnel monitoring. With our machines, you don't have to worry about that. They're fully shielded, nothing comes out of there. But you may have to set up personnel monitoring, or sometimes just to be safe, they will set up an area monitor, which is a monitor just on the wall or something close by to the machine. If for some reason there was some kind of escape of radiation, to be detected by that monitor and reported that way, and we can act accordingly. Then you have to have a radiation safety officer. That person does not have to be on site, but it's somebody who's trained in radiation safety. For us, most of the time, we will bring in a third party who will do all of these things. They can act as your RSO, they will do the survey, they will do radiation safety training for your people and take care of all of that. And it's not very expensive. It's $2,000 or $3,000 even to have somebody fly out and do that. So it's fairly simple process to register a machine. Okay, just a little bit about our technology. Our machine was designed from the ground up to be extremely simple and extremely reliable. It only has one moving part in the whole machine, which is inside the pump that does cooling circulation. And even for that pump, we chose a magnetically coupled pump. So we don't even have a physical connection between the motor and the pump. So there's no wear there, there's no friction. But anyway, we use a very powerful X-ray tube, a 12 kilowatt X-ray tube. And the black piece in the middle that looks like a big hunk of plastic, that is actually a patented material that we patented, which can reflect X-ray. And so about 10 to 15% of the X-ray energy that is created by the machine is actually reflected by that tray and back up into your product. So the end result of all of that is just that it makes the machine faster, right? Once it can use some X-ray that otherwise would have just been wasted. Has a very simple touchscreen interface. And then if you're wondering about the economics of it, you can go to our website. There's a little calculator on there. You can put in your own numbers. You know, I'm growing this many pounds per year and I sell for this price. I'm losing 10% or 15% to failed tests. Put all those numbers in there. It will calculate what a machine would cost you, ROI for the machine and all of that. XR Pure is a subsidiary of a very large company, Varix Imaging. Varix Imaging is the largest manufacturer of X-ray tubes and X-ray components in the world. We have sites all over the US and all over the world. And we make and sell X-ray tubes to companies everywhere in the world. So we've been in X-ray technology for about 75 years, have a lot of experience there, and have made thousands and thousands of X-ray machines similar to what our XR Pure machines like. Lastly, then, if you need something done quick, you know, October 29th is coming up and you've got batches coming down that you need treated. We've got a partner here in Mississippi at Coastal Crop Cannabis. Many of you may know Tommy already. Give Tommy a call and he can help you. That is a service that they're offering right now with one of our machines. And I think that's it. So I guess we'll just take questions later. Is that right? How do you want to do it? So, okay, thank you. Thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you for being here. Next up, we've got Mr. Nathan Kroger, the Vice President of Sales for RadSource Technologies. Okay.
So I'll move through it at the same time you move through it.
Okay.
So if you can see it.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. I know it's a big football Saturday. Too close to that. So I appreciate you coming out. My name is Nathan Kroger. I've been with I'm with RadSource. So for those of you who've been in the industry in other states, you probably heard about the Rad unit. You see the hats that say Rad on them, things like that. We've been doing this about 8 years. But my background, I've been doing medical device for the last 20 plus years. Prior to working for RadSource, I worked for a contract sterilization company. So we dealt a lot with ethylene oxide, gamma, e-beam, so sterility of medical devices. And prior to that, I worked for a company that actually did the sterility validations. Company of which we worked with, or a competitor, was up in Salt Lake City. I don't know if you know Mark Selliner's up there, but anyway. So yeah. So anyway, I've been doing that for the last 20 or so years. About 8 years ago, we started getting inundated with phone calls saying, will this work for our process? We tested it, and not only did it work great. So last 15 years, well, I've been with RadSource. These are some of the things we've been doing. We do blood irradiation. So if you've ever known anybody who gets a blood transplant, or if you've ever got a blood transplant, the chances are you've received irradiated blood. So when you talk about the safety of irradiation, obviously it's safe enough because the FDA has approved it for people who are sick or ill or who need blood because it's irradiated before it goes back in the body. The reason for that is called the graft versus host disease. Your body, even if you have the same blood type, your body can still reject it and it's deadly. So that's why blood's irradiated. Many of our customers are also involved in cancer research, virus research, large scale insect pest control, phytosanitary, which is for treatments of food coming in or leaving the United States, and then cannabis. The one I didn't put on here was NDT, non-destructive testing. So we work with a lot of big companies like you name it, golf ball manufacturers, airplane wings. We do a lot of that stuff as well. I don't do that. That's why it's not on my list. Whether for medicinal use or for recreational adult use, we want to make sure the product is clean for the end user. And one of the things that we want to talk, or I'm going to talk about, is understanding the D value and what it takes to reduce that down to a safe, usable level. Because even today, I've heard questions about why we need to do this. Why do we need to do microbial testing? Why is the state encouraging this? I don't have the answer for that, but what I do have is a solution for you. But I will tell you about my experience with microbial. So that's where I'm going to come from today. I'll also say that everything that Jeff said, we second. So he did a really good job explaining that. So good job, Jeff. All right. So microorganisms are always around us. They're in this room. They're on our skin. They're inside our bodies. We're more like Pigpen than we are Charlie Brown. So the reality is, if you have humans involved in the manufacturing or the grow process, you are going to have contamination. It is unless, and I have seen some grows like this where it's extremely aseptic, where everybody's wearing full PPE, the full bunny suits, where you walk through an air wash and it washes you off. In those cases, it's easier. It's possible potentially to control that, but most facilities, one of the first facilities I went to in Colorado years ago, the guys are wearing flip-flops, wearing dreads down to their butts, and they've got a dog walking down the middle of the path, and they're like, we don't know why we can't pass. I'm like, I can give you a few reasons. So the bottom line is we have a very symbiotic relationship with microbials. That being said, if you have a compromised immune system, you don't want them, right? So someone very close to me was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and she was going through chemotherapy, which gave her symptoms of nausea, vomiting, anxiety, pain. And because I'm in this industry, I went to her and I said, you need to take cannabis. You need to use this product because it's medicinal. And there's a lot of, I heard, I think Henry was talking about it today, about how there's misconceptions about the medicinal values of it. She didn't want to do it. I finally talked her into it. And I went to a dispensary to buy it. And it was the first time I, from a very personal level, walked in the dispensary and realized, I don't know what's clean here. I don't know what's safe for her to use. She has a compromised immune system. I don't know what's safe for her to use. So I was able to find a product and she was able to use it. And, just a testament to the medicinal value of it, she was able to come off of the 2 antiemetics, the anti-pain medication, and the anti-anxiety with one cannabis product that we used, which was amazing. I mean, she went on to go tell everybody she knows about it, which is great. She was buying them for her mom and a bunch of other things. So it was pretty funny. All right, so just a little humor here, probiotic, antibiotic, symbiotic relationship. So one of the things that, this is a characterization of the different microbials that you'll see on, you could see on your product. Aspergillus, botrytis, biotolerant gram-negative, E. coli. This is just our microbial misfits. So if you ever stop by one of our booths at the trade shows, we're at a lot of the trade shows. These are the different characters we have, like on stickers and so forth. But that's not why we're here. The reason we're here is to talk about the reason you want to inactivate those. So D value is a homogeneous population of microorganisms at a specific temperature on a specific medium exposed to a certain number of gray. Gray is the unit of measure. So Jeff mentioned it earlier. He was talking about 2,000 gray, 3,000 gray. Gray is a unit of measure. What we want to talk about is what it takes, when you give it a dose, can you reduce it by a certain amount? That's what a D10 value is. So if I give it a specific dose, I will reduce it by 1 log reduction. So an example is if I have 100,000 CFUs on a product, I give it, and this could be pre-rolls, this could be, anything you want to treat. Most of the time it's flour and trim, things of that nature, but we have a lot of customers who do pre-rolls. You want to give it a dose and you'll go from 100,000 down to 10,000. You give that same dose again, you go from 10,000 down to 1,000 and so on and so forth. Do that 6 times, it's called a 6-log reduction. This is the D10 value equation. You don't need to do it. It's just there for you to understand that it's there, and there's no math test afterwards, so you don't need to write it down. So one of the things I'm going to show you is how fast microbials can reproduce. This is a little joke about anything being more infectious than us, or other than children's laughter, besides E. coli. So I'm going to show you this. This is E. coli in 20 minutes. In 40 minutes, the population doubled. In another 20 minutes, it doubled again. An hour and 20 minutes, it doubled again. So on and so forth. Until 4 hours later, it's an extensive number of microbials. So if you have product that has microbials on there, Aspergillus niger, also known as black mold, and you put it, and it's on a growth medium that you put in your product and you stick it on a shelf, if people don't buy that right away, even if it passed the 10,000 CFUs, it can still grow. And I'm going to show you some of it. So this right here is your 20 minutes. This is your 4 hours. This is why this is important. So the other thing that's important to understand is different microbials have different D10 values. So you might have aerobic bacteria, which might be super sensitive to photonic decontamination, or you might have Aspergillus niger, which is more resistant to it. So it just means you have to provide a higher dose. So here's an example of a testing lab out in Nevada that had got product in June of 2019. They had they put it in the fridge or in the cold storage for until September. Sample 1 started at 386,000 CFUs. CFUs are the colony forming units. It's a way that microbiologists can track how much how much microbials are on a product. At 4 months, sitting in the refrigerated area, it went from 386,000 to 500,000. So it grew even though it was sitting in a refrigerated area. At a partial treatment, it went down to 2,000 CFUs. At a full treatment, it went down to 0. Sample 2 was an example of one where the microbials that were on there couldn't handle the cold. Started at 5,000, 4 months later, there was nothing on there. Sample number 3, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to get down to non-detect, but even if it gets down to non-detect, this is the reason we don't make sterility claims. We can do that, and I'm happy to take you through the process as if it was a medical device. It's expensive, it's labor intensive, but that's why nobody does it. But here's an example of where they were 0. Even in the cold refrigerator, it went to 4,000 just sitting there. The next one is the one that scares me the most. This one would have passed 5,000 CFUs. 4 months later, they're at 186,000. If you have someone who has a compromised immune system who consumes that, they are much higher risk of getting sick. And that's not in an ideal growth area where, room temperature sitting on a shelf with moisture content. Cannabis is an ideal place for certain microbials to grow, cannabis flower. So I'm often asked, where do these test requirements come from? So there's 3 primary places that a lot of people look to. One's the European Pharmacopoeia, one's the United States Pharmacopoeia, and the third one is the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization says 100,000 CFUs on herbal products is acceptable. United States and Europe, a lot more strict. So what a lot of the states will do is not only do they follow other states who've done it before them, but they're going back to these tables that have been put together based on years of science and study of microbial reduction. And that's not just with radiation. That's microbial reduction in general. So these are some of the different sterilization / sanitization methods: dry heat, radio frequency, steam, low temperature, chemical, photonic irradiation. All of these will work. But the question is whether or not it's going to achieve the results you want. Is it going to get down to non-detect? And is it going to be able to leave your flower in the condition that you want it to be? So Jeff mentioned it earlier, the electromagnetic spectrum. On the left, you've got your radio frequency. Everybody's familiar with microwave. You take your hungry man dinner, you throw it in the microwave, you run it for 5 minutes, it heats it up, right? We're on the other end of the spectrum. Can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't feel it. That's what makes radiation dangerous. Well, Anybody who's been in here has got an X-ray. It didn't make you radioactive, as Jeff pointed out. It doesn't make the product radioactive. All it does is it breaks up those bonds so that it can't reproduce. It becomes non-viable. One of the ways on the medical device side, and you don't need to remember this, I'm just putting this out there so you understand some of the science that goes behind this, is they've identified microbials that are highly resistant to radiation. One of which is Bacillus pumilus, another is Bacillus subtilis. They put those onto strips, so they have a known population on those strips. Then they put them into the product, they process the product, and they pull the samples out, and they put them into an incubator for a certain number of days, 4 or 5, 6 days, whatever that's set up for. And if at the end of that process, actually in the case of the strips, they dump them into a liquid. But point is that in the case of 4 or 5 days, they can see whether that product was inactivated or not inactivated. So you also have ampules that have solutions with a known number of microorganisms, and then you also have process challenge devices where they'll take those spore strips and put them inside of it. Again, you don't need to know this, and the reason for that is because of the testing. If you didn't have strict testing, or if you didn't have some of the testing that's being required, you might have to go through this process to validate that your process is going to be able to make it safe for consumers. So one of the things, there's 2 primary ways, and I'm not going to go into detail on really either one of these, but PCR is one, and the other one is culture. So in the case of the culture, you basically take your product, you wash it off, you rinse it, you put it onto an agar, not agar, but petri dish that has a growth media on it. And this is what it looks like after the incubation period. So on the left-hand side, you can see it has high levels of CFUs. I've seen some where they're completely covered. And then in the back, you can see there's no CFUs. So microbiologists would look at that. They would count it. They would tell you how many, what's on your product. Or if it's too much, if it's too bad, they'll just say it's too high to count, too numerous to count. So there's 3 primary ways you can determine this: fraction negative, survival curve, overkill. You don't need to know all that. What you need to know is that survival curve is what we typically do in this industry. I'm not going to talk about that. So one of the things we provide our customers when they work with, they'll say, well, what dose should I give? And we can't give you a good answer to that. The reason why is because we don't know what's on your product. We don't know if you have aerobic bacteria. We don't know if you have Aspergillus niger. We don't know if you have biotolerant gram negative. And even if you, we work with a number of MSOs, even if you have MSOs that are in the same state, that have almost all the same SOPs, they can have different microorganisms in those facilities because the ceilings might, what's in the airflow systems might be different, or what's in the water coming into the building might be different. So one of the things we tell people is when you start the process, you have to go through and optimally what you want to do is you want to take a control sample, so three to five components, and then you want to take 4 to 6 sets of those, and then you want to irradiate them at a different, or process them at different levels, so 500, 1,000, 1,500, and what that does is it shows you where that survival curve looks like. Most people don't go through that effort. A lot of people just do the shotgun approach. They just hit it with 3,000 gray and call it good. But time is money, right? And so if you want to get done with the cycle faster, and you take the time and you have the resources to do it, you can dial that process in where you're delivering 900 gray and you get your product in and out of the cycle and out the door pretty quick. So that's why we put those together. This is just talks about that a little more in detail. The important part of this is that you want the same strain, same lot, because variability can occur from lot to lot. And when you change this, or when you track this, keep in mind, this isn't just for that one cycle. Seasons change. The workers you have change. It's a dynamic process. It constantly moves. On the medical device side, they make these people track this for 2 to 3 years before they can go to what's called parametric release. So it depends on how good their quality controls and things are. But the bottom line is, I get people who will be passing at 1,500 gray and all of a sudden they can't pass. Well, the seasons change. The moisture levels are higher. There's different things that are going on that they don't have control over. So that's why it's important to understand your process as much as possible. Or you just hit it with a high dose and don't worry about it. So here's some of the D10 values. So for example, the Clostridium, that's 1,000 gray to reduce it by 90%. So if you have 100,000 of the Clostridium, you would reduce it down to 10,000 with 1,000 gray. Obviously, you're not going to get to that 6 log reduction by 3,000 gray. So that would take a much higher dose. Most of the time, you're not going to have, I've never heard of anybody having that on their product. Staphylococcus aureus, you could get that 6-log reduction at under 1,000 gray. On the low end, on the high end, it could be a little bit over 1,500 gray. And the reason is because that medium makes a difference. What you have on your flower might be different than what you have, like say, in your concentrate or in, you know, some of the different cannabis products. So that's why you can't say, well, 900 gray always works on flower, and why is it not working on this product? Well, it's because you've got to do the process for that product in order to understand it, or you just hit it with a higher dose. So here's one of the ones that will show up on your product: black mold, Aspergillus niger. On the high end, it's 420 gray per log reduction, which coincides with one of the studies I'm going to show you here that the Department of Health of California did. So the reason I'm here is because of our Quastar technology. So you probably, again, going back to, you've heard of people who have the RAD units in their facilities. Our X-ray technology is unique. There's no one else in the world that has it. It's designed to produce a large quantity of usable, ionizing, usable high-quality photons. We have the highest throughput per kilowatt energy usage. We also have some of the best dose uniformity because of the way our equipment operates. Just to show you a visualization of that, on the left would be traditional X-ray technology. On the right is ours. Ours is more like a light bulb. So when you put product in one of our chambers, it's getting much higher, much better dose uniformity exposure. So this is one of the customers in California that failed their test. They wanted to go through the remediation process. And what they did is they took 4 of these Petri dishes with the growth media on it. 2 of them they inoculated with a microorganism they got from somewhere like ATCC. I don't know what the microorganism was. And then the other 2 they took from their product. So they took 1 of each, and they put one of each into an incubator, didn't treat it. The other 2 they put into the incubator. They ran that. They gave it a cycle. This is, I think, 4 days later. You can see there's no growth on the treated side. So it completely inactivated those microbials that were on there. Here's another one that shows 13,000 CFUs, partial treatment down to 4,000, full treatment 1,000. You'll also see total yeast and mold partial treatment down to non-detect. One of the things we don't say is sterile, right? The reason for that is because we don't make the claim because of the process you have to go through. We make the statement non-detect. You'll also notice interior coliforms, those numbers on that second went up a little higher. That could just be a sample polling issue, because you can see at the second level of dose it was down to 100, and at the third level dose it was non-detect. So this is one of my favorite things that I've seen over the last 8 years. Back on May 5th in 2023, the Cannabis Regulatory Group in Colorado went out. They use a metric system. They went out to their customers and they asked their customers who was using what remediation technology. They found that 90% of them were using X-ray, 4% of them were using radiation UV, which they later determined was actually X-ray. The people just didn't know how to identify it when they were going through they didn't identify it correctly. So 94% of the people who were using remediation in Colorado were using X-ray. They also found that 100% of the people who used X-ray were using one manufacturer. That was us. Most running, one of the things they had concerns with was X-ray exposure, but Jeff did a good job talking about how we are federally regulated, and so we have to meet certain requirements to make sure that they're safe. And then, but here's my favorite part of this whole thing is we will hear people say, "Oh, you affect the terpenes, you affect the cannabinoids, you affect the texture." This was an independent collection of data by the regular party in Colorado. And they said no reported impacts on terpene, cannabinoid content, or appearance. This isn't RadSource telling you that. This is the growers like you who are using the equipment and who reported it to the state of Colorado. So just to reiterate, radiation has been around for a long time. They've been radiating food and food products since 1905. If you've had a papaya, pineapple, guava, anything that comes in from the United States, it's been processed with something. Most likely, it's been processed with radiation. I was at a conference in Maryland about 4 months ago, and one of the presenters got up and talked about the big food processing facility they put in McAllen, Texas. where the fruit and vegetables and whatnot that come across the border before they can be released in the United States have to go through this process. And I think you'd be surprised at how much of the product is actually being processed. They're going into grocery stores all across the United States. The other big thing that's important to point out is up until 2019, if you irradiated any pharmaceutical, it became a new drug. So if I took Tylenol, I irradiated it. Now it's a new drug. I take that Tylenol through the same level of testing that you'd have to do to get it approved the first time. As of 2019, they said we have enough information. It's no longer considered unsafe. Will not diminish public health protections, so they no longer consider it unsafe. And the reason why is because they have enough information about it. So this was the thing I was talking about earlier, that those 4 petri dishes I showed you earlier, when they shared that information with the state didn't believe them. And so I had to get on a call with about 7 people from the state of California, and we had a long conversation with them. And that's how they ended up with one of our units. And then they ended up doing this study. This study is open source, so you can go to the internet and download it. But it talks about what they did to irradiate 4 different strains of Aspergillus. And little secret, I guess not a secret, they were able to inactivate all of them at 2,500 gray. So this is one of the facilities here in North America that has 10 units. We have multiple facilities like this throughout the United States. These are our 420 XLs that run all day long processing people's product. So lastly, I just want to leave you with 2 things. One, we highly recommend getting down to non-detect for the end users. Healthy people, probably not an issue. Worst case scenario, you get a little bit of lung infection, cough or whatever, it goes away. But people who have compromised immune systems, it's much more dangerous for them. So we recommend getting down to non-detect. Plus, it helps preserve your product, as Jeff pointed out. It helps shelf life. But second, and this is just a plug for RadSource, we aren't usually the first stop. People go somewhere else first, but with rare exceptions, we are the last stop. So with that, I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over to Henry.
Thank you, Nathan. I hope I kept up with your slide changes on my end. Next, we have Miss Carly Bader, the Manager of Science from Willow Technologies, one of the country's leading ozone remediation companies. So please welcome Miss Bader. Give me a second so I can put your slides in.
Thanks, everyone. I'll give him that minute, and we're going to divert just a little bit to something a little more organic. While he gets that up, I can introduce myself. So hi, I'm Carly Bader. I'm from Willow Industries. We are a company out of Denver, Colorado, where our instruments machines are built, and also where my lab is. So I have a little bit of a longer kind of 2-part presentation today because our company has kind of 2 arms to it. Not only do we have our decontamination technology, but we also have a team of scientists that we deploy into your facility to come and inspect, help you assess and determine the source of your contamination so that you can grow cleaner quality products all the way through your process. Awesome. So I think I'm going to be able to go pretty quick on some of these early slides because some of our other introducers here have hit them. But today we're going to be talking about microbial contamination. I have worked at 2 different labs within Denver, Colorado, all of which were fully hemp and cannabis testing labs, where we tested pesticides, heavy metals, microbials, as well as inspected for foreign material. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me as well. Open to all of the scientific inquiries that you have today. But today we're going to be talking about microbials specifically. Next slide. So beyond the legal liability, I know we have the Department of Health and our regulators here today, but we also have both the medical and customer safety perspective. Medical patients need a high quality and clean product for them to consume, especially if they're in fact immunocompromised. But we also have customers that are becoming more and more educated about the quality of their products. And recently, we've seen a lot of purchasers in New York where you actually have to label the amount of total yeast and mold on that product, not just the potency, really diving into that data and determining that they want cleaner product. So because of that, we have many today decontamination solutions. So this is where we are going to be eliminating harmful bacteria, protecting customer safety, as well as extending shelf life. And in this slide here, we are showing the use of aqueous ozone, which is used very often for the use of food, because only the video or picture of gaseous ozone doesn't look as cool. So how does ozone decontamination work? We have ozone, which is an organic molecule that is going to be attacking these microbes. They are going to be effectively breaking them apart and going to render them inactive. And so you have no viable or pathogenic microbes in that sample as your test comes out and the lab is processing it. There's another review here about how it controls microorganism growth, enhances food safety, and extends shelf life. Again, lots of research that has been done throughout the FDA and many, many years of ozone, both aqueous and gaseous, being used on food products all over the country. So to use it on marijuana, we have determined that gaseous is the best choice, right? We don't want to put any liquid on your product and make it wet. Microbes love wet. So we have in our device an ozone generator. So there is no consumables. This is going to plug into a regular outlet. And because of that ozone generation of gas going over your product, there's absolutely no change in temperature. There's no need for a chiller. And this item is about the size of half of this table, a little bit bigger than your average like washing machine. If you're really into the chemistry, we can go there. Like I said, I'm a molecular microbiologist, but I know there might be some chemists in the room. And this is the way in which a lot of these technologies work. They are making oxidation, reactive oxygen species. These ROS are going to go in and kind of attack your problem. And so this is the machine. Like I said, it's about the size of a dishwasher and includes a barrel there. This makes it really easy for you to put about 25 to 30 pounds of your product into the barrel and load it into the machine. We have another system that I don't have here that has racking trays. If you have pre-rolls and you want to put those on racks, or if you have smaller batches and want to do multiple batches at a time, you can determine batch A is on the top 2 racks, B on the bottom 2 racks, C, so on forth and so on. Whereas this would be a full batch that is going to be treated uniformly. So the team is really helpful in using me as a guinea pig. We often make sure that I can lift these type of things to make sure that it is really safe for the occupants of both the room and the users of the device. So we have the ozone being pumped into that drum where the product is. It's also enclosed in that second chamber. So our ozone is not being released into the room. We have a very specific amount of ozone that is being penetrated onto that product and is not going to be involving any of the users of that machine. So all internal. 1 second. No, that's okay. We also have a leak detector in case there is any such leak that will inform both you as well as us. These are online, so we can see everything that's going on, your runs. Like I said, we're really more of a partnership program where we help you throughout this process. So the ozone will shut off and we will be notified. We'll contact you and really quickly kind of get in touch with you about what might be going on in that room. So we also have some data on percent kill that we showed here. We have 20 independent cultivators here that have been using this and sending us all data. We have some great partnerships with the lab so we can understand the data coming through. And we've gotten in over 2-hour runs, a 92% kill, 4-hour runs, a 94% kill, and 6-hour runs showing a 98% kill. So again, this is something that you guys will dial in. You know, if you can do this and you have a low microbial load in 2 hours, that's great. If you have a little bit more or an aspergillus spore that's a little hardier, you might need that 4 or 6-hour run. So again, we really in that partnership help you dial that runtime in. Go ahead. And then with this, we also have seen no degradation of cannabinoids, THC specifically here in this data, or terpenes. We see in some of our higher run times of 16 to 18 hours, that being a bit more of an aggressive run time, some loss, but we actually don't even recommend that. So we really kind of, as a scientist and doing good R&D, I pushed it to the limits, right? Where do we see any issue? So 8-hour runtime is kind of our max, and you'll see some of that in the other technologies as well. And then with terpenes as well, we did this in a 16-hour run, again, pushing it to the limit, and we saw no degradation or change in terpenes in our cannabis. We also have our support, our microbial and scientific support. And we've seen that with consistent GMP practices, based on our recommendations, we see really great 99+% kill in cultivators that are using a combination of the technology and our support and recommendations. So the next thing I'm going to go into is what we call Willow Scientific, the other arm of our program. And this is because in cannabis, what we're seeing more and more is that people are looking for quality. They're not longer looking for just potency numbers, but they're looking for quality products and something that might be organic or, in fact, good to start with, right? So within our Willow Scientific, we look at air, water, surfaces, raw materials, and really get a good understanding of what's going on in your facility. What are your humans doing? What is your team doing? And how can we educate them better? So this Willow Scientific team, in tandem with education around reducing this bioburden, we come into your facility, work with your team, understanding what points they need to meet, aerobic bacteria, total yeast and mold. We are also national, so we see everything in these different states. And we're gonna build a program that works for you in your specific state based on your regulations. So we work through your SOPs. We can even help you rewrite those and get a better understanding of those. But we come in with our assessment and toolkit to provide you with data around contamination. Really, we believe that testing the inputs and testing your facility as a whole can help you determine the causation of this infection or this microbial contamination, and we can help resolve that. So we come in with a kit. All of these things are TSA approved, so we can fly with them. We don't bring any of your flower products back to our lab. It's just going to be water samples, soil samples, air samples. And with this, we can really get a view of your cultivation as a whole. If you're just a processing facility, we can also help with that and get a good understanding of where this microbial contamination might be coming from. With that, we give suggestions, recommendations, and depending on your price point, right? It might be something as big, if you want to put in a full-on HVAC system. It might be something like changing your MERV 13 filters more often. Those are very, very cheap in comparison to an HVAC. So we really try and work with each client and each producer to get a best understanding of what's fit for them. So to mitigate, we talk about air filtration, water quality, surveillance, testing raw materials, and workflow, because we believe that preparing, preventing, and monitoring throughout your cultivation is important. We've talked a little bit about seasonal changes. This is something we've experienced throughout our 8 years of being in the industry, or I should say my 8 years of being in the industry, and really having a good grasp on your cultivation, your team, as well as using the other arm of getting that process of putting your product through the Willow machine for that, average 2 hours, maybe 1 hour, while you are in fact also working within your cultivation to prevent some of those problems from occurring. So we believe, again, that in employing these strategic and systematic approaches, we believe there's an increase in both efficiency and efficacy. Efficiency within your cultivation and efficacy of our instrument to get out quality product to your consumers faster. So as I said, we are all over the place. I was just in Michigan and now I'm in Massachusetts. This is super awesome to be able to meet all of you guys. So if you have, I did put some time for questions in my section, if that's okay. I wanted to see if you guys had any questions specific to ozone, because I know we have a lot of other teams. So I wanted to keep the conversation going and kind of hand the mic off to anyone who has any questions.
Back in the late eighties and early nineties, when I had a small brew room, I had a ionizer creating ozone. And after that,
Yeah, I'm gotcha. So we definitely have a lot of people who talk about getting a small Amazon $35 ozone generator and putting it into their room. And what happens here is ozone, because it is so reactive, it's going to react with that first plant. As that gas hits that first plant, it's going to react, and that's about as far as you're going to get. So we actually have done studies on this, putting plates around a room, putting an ozone generator in one corner, air plates, like settle plates that are going to capture any of those microbes. Nathan had the pictures of them in one of his slides. And looking at the contamination throughout that room, and very easily it's seen that around the ozone generator, very clean. Farther away, much dirtier. So that's why we have this drum that you're going to put your product into, so that all of the product within that drum is going to be evenly distributed with ozone. And I know some of the previous people talked about it as well, that there's no tumbling. This isn't like a washing machine or dryer. It's going to go up 15 degrees every, however often you actually choose. We have some people that decide they don't want their drum to turn at all. You can turn it off. You can have it turn a quarter turn every 15 minutes, a quarter turn every hour, whatever works for your product. We don't wish to tumble it, but it's more of a folding, like you would fold an egg. So we want to make sure that we're getting gaseous penetration all through that product, but it is contained inside this drum. And that drum, we have ozone ppm like sensors to make sure that we're getting even distribution of that ozone across the product. And that sensor is going to maintain that ozone generation into that drum continually. And so that all of that product in that small drum is getting treated evenly, and that you have a consistent, result at the end. A little bit different than just putting it into a room that is most certainly possibly not sealed completely, and things of that nature. So we have a very, very, I would say, proprietary, or I guess my CEO would say proprietary, I'm a scientist, novel process of treating the product safely inside the drum, not treating the room, not treating the people, just make sure that that product is safe for use. Is that a little bit better? Yeah, I mean, Jill spent a lot of time engineering this. We've got a great team in Denver who, again, we have this device. We also have the standing device, which you put racks in for 20. It's called the 20. You can put trays of product in it. And yeah, I don't know if I'd say reverse engineering this. You guys can just come on team with us. Ozone is really great. So percentage usage of ozone in cannabis in the US. So we also have units in Australia and Canada, but in the US, I'm not sure if I could determine that. I know Nathan had some CDPHE documents up there, and I know that those also were not complete. CDPHE and the MAD have recently redone that because what was reported there is on metric, and because that's not regulated, that questionnaire part of metric is not regulated. People, as he said, like we're putting other and they didn't know what they were clicking at. So we don't really have that data. I will tell you, I'm busy and we're building machines all the time. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Carly. And I want to remind everybody, I'm going to add a copy of everyone's slides from the presentations today to our new website, which we just launched last week, 3mams.org. I don't think there's a link to these slides there yet, but by Monday, I'll make sure everybody's slides is on there. Next up, we have Arthur De Cordova, CEO and co-founder of Ziel Technologies, another UV remediation company, coming to present.
Thank you, Henry. I'll begin with a statement that all of you here know. Growing cannabis is tough. You've invested your savings, your time, your energy. When we talk with cultivators, we look at their plants like their children. They all think they're different. Sad reality is that microbials are everywhere, and they can take your business away from you unless you address them. I'll begin with a story. 10 years ago, we started this business. Ziel is a food pasteurization company. We pasteurize food products in Australia, sesame seeds in Mexico, chia seeds in Chile, nuts and almonds in California. And we were tapped on the shoulder by the largest outdoor grower in the country at the time, Los Sueños Farms. Anybody ever heard of Los Sueños in Colorado? 40 acres. They approached Ziel at a food show and said, we think you've got a technology that could keep us in business. We said, what's your business? And said, well, it's cannabis. Oh, that was novel at the time. But they'd done the research on radio frequency and our pasteurization, and they knew that it worked. And we owe a lot of gratitude to that company because they took us into the cannabis business. We really weren't looking at it. But we've been in it now for 10 years. And, you know, too many of our customers have been playing, we call COA roulette. They don't treat their products, they put their COAs in, then they wait. A lot of sleepless nights. There's no reason to go through that. The microbial control solutions are here today. My colleagues, we each have a different solution. They work. They will improve your business. We know that with the Mississippi regulations, that's a scary prospect. But just like that grower in Colorado 10 years ago when MED introduced TYMC, they were in a panic. Every single one of them was going to fail. You're in a much better position right now because these solutions are here. They can address your problems. You can succeed and you can get your product to market. So we know failing is expensive. It leads to a lot of problems. Product recalls, lost time, but more importantly, one of the trends is in cannabis, people would wait to fail and then remediate. Best practices now are the companies are using a kill step. Think of milk. It's a kill step. Doesn't mean that the product is bad, but it's a preventative measure for the consumer safety. So best practices today in the industry among your peers in other states and around the world, introduce that microbial control solution on the front end before you test. Because not only is testing expensive, but to go back to retest, then you get the dreaded R in metric. It's been remediated. And then guess what? You go to sell your remediated product at a dispensary, they're going to shoot you down on price because the perception is it was bad and it was treated to get back to market. That's an argument of a weak one, but one that the dispensaries are in business too will use against you. But treating the product ahead of time is good for the consumer and it's good for your business. So here's a case study. You all tell me if these are realistic numbers, but I've heard ranges of wholesale prices around of $1,000. But just to illustrate the cost and the benefit to you of employing a microbial control solution in your business to improve your bottom line. If you are growing cannabis and selling it at $1,100 wholesale value and you fail, what are your options? I'm not familiar with all the regulatory compliance regulations here in Mississippi, but destruction, no, nobody's gonna do that. Most likely you either remediate it, but then you've got the dreaded R, or you're gonna send it over the wall or to a neighbor who's got a manufacturing solution. They don't buy flour, they buy trim, they buy biomass. So they're gonna pay you what they would pay for biomass or trim. So call it $100 in this illustrative example. That's $1,000 delta. If you're failing 20% on a 5,000 pounds a year, that's a thousand pounds, $1,000 delta difference give up, it's $1 million difference. This is big business to bring your product so you can get the highest value possible and bring it to market. So radio frequency has been around since 50 years, originally for drying textiles. And then our company brought it into pasteurizing food products. And then we got that tap on the shoulder for cannabis. Cannabis is now consumed 90% of our business. And we are a global business. Henry? Stay with me, Henry. This shows where we are, our footprint globally. Europe is one of our biggest markets now. Medical market, it's a medical market only in the EU. And it's a it's a small market compared to many of our state markets here. Give an example. As you know, there are many multi-billion-dollar states, $3 billion markets in Michigan, California, Illinois, I think even Arizona is at that tipping point right now. Germany is leading the way, but they are also setting the standards for all the other EU countries. And one of their, they follow the European Pharmacopoeia. I think one of my frenemies here referenced the European Pharmacopoeia. It was you, Jeff? Yeah. And so they're following that standard, and it's a rigorous standard. Okay, so how does the radio frequency work? And it's different. The radio spectrum was showed here earlier, rather wide, but there's a dividing line. On one side is the high energy technologies, the X-ray, E-beam, gamma. Those are ionizing radiation. On the other side of the spectrum, low energy. Sorry, folks. Low energy is radio wave. Radio wave is not microwave. Distinctly different. What's unique about radio frequency, which really lends itself well to cannabis, has very long penetration deep into the flower. And what it does is it takes the inherent water molecules in the flower and it oscillates those water molecules 27 million times a second. That friction creates heat, a very controlled heat. So we can modulate our heat through our recipes from low temperature to more aggressive temperature without impacting the quality of the flower. Also, I just want to mention that the FDA has approved radio frequency as an organic compliant treatment, which we have attained that in the United States for our food processing. In Canada, EcoCert has approved radio frequency for its organic cannabis. It's federally approved up there. And over in Europe, our technology is EU GMP validated. So highest standard over there in Europe. The evolution of our company, we started, I call this the big beast. This was overbuilt. It was the first one we made for that unit, that company in Colorado. It's called the Apex 7. It is big, it's heavy. Fast forward after 7 years in the market, dozens and dozens employed around the world. We engaged an industrial designer to make the next generation unit. If it looks a little bit like a sleek iPhone, that's because the gentleman who started Apple's industrial design group back in the late 1990s, Robert Brunner, we hired him to make the ugly beast into a better looking beast. But it's the same throughput. What we did was make it smaller. Same features, but it runs on 240 power instead of 480 3-phase. It's also plug and play. It's 2-hour installation. It's up and running. No facility changes at all to deploy the system. So when you compare the two, half the footprint, different power, but the same throughput. And a very big difference in price. Okay, Henry? So we compare, when we talk to our customers, there are 3 types of stakeholders. There's the financial, there's the qualitative, the QA, and then the operation. So we've broken this slide into 3 of those buckets with sub-criteria for each one. So we need to have a value proposition for each one of the stakeholders at a company. You may wear all those hats yourself. You may have other people in the company. But these are, we found, the things that those stakeholders want to know most about. And financially, it's a levelized cost of ownership. So you see that Ziel has the lowest processing cost per pound. That's over a 5-year horizon. That's the capital equipment, the operating cost divided by the volume throughput over 5 years. We have a commanding position in throughput. We do 2.5 kilos or 5.5 pounds in 15 minutes. So you'd have to buy multiple units of our peers to get the same throughput with one of ours. Next slide. We also have different price points. So our first generation Apex 7, we have new units, but we also from time to time take back units, companies go out of business, we recondition them. And so you get the same value for 240,000 as you can for 304,000. We also have financing available. We have financing partners that will, writing a cash check is a big number. We understand that. So we work with the largest financing companies in the industry to provide financing and or leasing solutions, which is pretty much the standard in the market these days. So going forward, we engage in a discussion with you. We sign an NDA. We give you a term sheet. Then we open up our book, talk to our customers, go visit our customers, go talk to them directly, see what they say. We have people flying in from Germany, from Macedonia to installations in Massachusetts, or people in Canada coming down to one of our showcase customers in Michigan. So we want you to speak to our customers without us there. And thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Arthur. I know you traveled a long way from Massachusetts to be here, so we appreciate it. Finally, we have Mr. Kyle Baker of Clean Theory. He is our last remediation presenter of the day, and then we'll open it up for questions, not just questions for our presenters. If you have any questions if Laura is willing to take them, the Department of Health is here. Alchemy Analytics is here to answer any questions on the testing side. So please be prepared to ask them. Did I get a copy of your presentation? Do you have a PowerPoint? You're just gonna get up here and rant? Sounds good to me.
Hey, folks, Kyle Baker with Clean Theory. Henry's asked me to behave today, so I'm gonna do my best. My name's Kyle. I'm the founder and CSO of Clean Theory. Been in the industry from about 2014. Come here today, kind of a unique perspective. Small business owner. Been there. Been around regulatory change, around about 26 states so far. Man, I understand when we have changes and trying to figure out how to navigate those. You guys are in a unique position. It's not going to be easy. Our company is based solely around prevention. We've worked in parallel industries, drinking water, food processing, pharmaceutical, as well as having this distinct honor, really, of working for the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and biological and chemical threats. What we do in other industries is literally a matter of life and death. We've had situations like in California that make peanut butter sandwiches, something as simple as that, where children have died because of listeria outbreaks. When we look at cannabis and what the current medical regulatory system is putting in place, what we're looking to do is prevent problems from happening to the consumer. From our perspective, so I'm an EPA registrant, so we manufacture chemistry in these different industries in cannabis to make sure we kill microbes that can cause a problem for the most at-risk patients. We support this. Statistically, if we look at pathogens as a whole, larger the number, the higher the probability that there might be a potential infection. And we've seen this in the data. We've got about 85 years of missing science and data from a medical perspective
of how it actually affects human health. And while cannabis in and of itself has not caused death to date, there are things that are in it that can harm people, unintended consequences. From a chemistry perspective, from a microbial perspective, we're here to be a resource. Everybody good today? I got a little too serious there, didn't I? Sorry. What you guys are facing might seem difficult, but there are things you can do starting today to prevent those things. Simple things like cleaning twice a day. I know it sounds stupid easy. We've worked around the country I never get a phone call from a client that's in a good place. They're normally failing 80–90% of their tests. Their investors are facing them down. They're not making revenue. They might not make payroll next week. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing you can do that says magically everything's going to go away and get better. What we can do today is start process, procedures, consistency. So regardless of what chemistry you use, regardless if you use us, looking at using the right tools and process are going to be the most important things that help you with everything that these guys discussed today, right? Remediation methodologies. If we're able to lower our CFUs, lower the counts of different microbials, it means you have to have less reliance on remedial technology. It might even mean, from my perspective, that it becomes a kill step and not a remedial aspect. It's an ongoing debate. Our job is to be an advocate for how do we be successful and have the highest quality product at the least possible cost. We communicate and work with people that don't even use our company. So if you guys want to call us, ask us questions, a lot of what we do, some of the most important work we do with cultivation actually, is peeling back the layers of the different technologies that are out there that have lots of shiny brochures. I got one of my favorites is a company that says you put this box in your room, you plug it in, and it makes this molecule called trioxidane. And it sterilizes an entire room. Now that's significant for us. But I like to think that that is the most relevant technology to date because it bends space and time. Because from our scientific perspective, trioxidane is a hypothetical molecule that lasts only fractions of a second. And in reality, it's creating ozone. And it's filling a room with ozone. And if you can smell it, it's above permissible exposure limits, which can harm your employees. So all these things that we're talking about with state limits of 10,000 units, it also has this other side to it. And as good producers, good manufacturers, we should be looking at, one, we want to manufacture good cannabis. We want to be good leaders in business, and we want to be good consumers. We want to have good cannabis. If we look at the employees that will be working in our facility, one of the biggest problems we're going to start to see, promise you, mark my words, is in 5 to 10 years, we're going to start to see things like COPD, histoplasmosis, cultivator cough. Any legacy growers out here? Been in the industry for a while? No, yeah, you ever heard of cultivation cough? Is it a thing? Not sure? Okay. These are our friends. These are the people that we're bringing into our businesses. And if we're exposing customers and employees to dangerous chemistries and bad conditions, we're going to have another risk that's out back. And that risk will come in the form of lawsuits when we start getting people sick. So it's absolutely critical that we focus on preventative methodologies. Any questions so far? No? Can I misbehave yet? Can I misbehave yet? Okay, good. We're coming to Mississippi. We're based on as a food agricultural route. So we service about 26% of all US water. As I mentioned, we work with like Anheuser-Busch, Red Bull, Gallo Wine. If you had a chicken nugget, my favorite, I don't know about you guys. we have a part of that process in making sure conditions and the environment is sanitary. It has a 6-log reduction, which is kind of the hallmark of what we try to look for in reducing microbial load consistently. And that way we don't make consumers sick or employees. So we have a pretty big lift. Right now, we're all in the Northeast, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. We're working with cultivators on the West Coast and California and Nevada. Our systems have reduced or eliminated the reliance on remediation. And the result has been kind of interesting. And we didn't see this when we first started. We actually had higher yields, greater cannabinoids, greater THC potency, and basically healthier environments. The result was they were more profitable and they didn't have to go through the reliance. Now, we had some clients that spent millions and millions of dollars on remediation technologies. And what we did there was reduced the bottlenecks that occur from having to remediate. If you're growing X number of pounds and I can only put Y pounds in, it means I created a bottleneck. But if we're able to reduce the amount of CFUs, the bio burden, then we have greater throughput. Great book called The Goal. Check it out. Talks about bottlenecks and capacities. Really interesting from a business perspective. So today, we do have some folders outside. We're looking for new clients out. So this is our big opportunity to come out here, talk to you guys, talk to you more in depth about what we do, talk to you more in depth about unintended consequences of things you might be considering from a scientific perspective. By the way, I'm not a scientist. I just work with a lot of what we call OSP, other smart people. I'm a very good parent. So after I'm done here, come get a folder, come get a t-shirt, and we've got a couple guys out here. Yes, sir. I can't hear you.
Okay, what you say, it sounds like you say, ozone and poison.
Carly, is ozone poisonous or is considered toxic? So what's your name, sir? David, Mr. Lyons. So you always have to respect chemistry. And when we look at chemistry, there are different categories for it. It could be toxic, it could be hazardous, it could be carcinogenic. There's a lot of different perspectives that are definitions that we need to look at. And then all is reliant on the concentrations. For example, I work in chlorine dioxide, okay? So there are OSHA standards called permissible exposure limits and short-term exposure limits. And in order to assess those limits, we have to examine the most compromised of our society. People who are pregnant, cancer, heart conditions, lung issues, etc. Those studies dictate what we can put in the air and on the surface and on different applications of our chemistry. Ozone's no different. I will say this. When we look at ozone, ozone is extraordinarily good at certain things. So if we look at water, for example, it's oftentimes used as a pre-oxidant, okay, in drinking water to make sure, I don't know if you guys remember back about 120, 140 years ago, a lot of people died from drinking water. Bleach is a big part of why we don't die anymore. Modern water disinfection exercises ozone as a pre-oxidant to reduce the number of CFUs, and then uses products like chlorine dioxide to create a residual downline through an EPA water quality standard. So your question is nuanced. Is it toxic? Yeah, of course it can be. So can other chemistries. Water can be toxic. The apples that you eat have arsenic in it. So it's not a straightforward answer. It requires a deeper conversation. Is that acceptable to you? Yeah, you should not be putting ozone into environments of which people are in. Number one, it's going to create irreversible health effects. If you can smell it, it means it's above the permissible exposure limit. Number two, it creates other byproducts through multi-generational chemistry. And number three, if you do and OSHA finds out, you're going to get a hefty fine and probably shut down. That answer it? Okay, that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't do that. Okay. What was your question? You gotta speak a little louder so I can hear you. You come up here, I can hear you. You got good questions and I appreciate them.
I used to stick those up generator in my face.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
this
no,
was over 30 years ago. I think 35 years ago.
yeah, man. Don't do that.
But so something else I was trying to figure out is like Grow Generation is telling me about these bleach packs that they're putting in grow rooms, and I'm going, man, this sounds really
That's probably what's called the two precursor methodology of chlorine dioxide.
Huh?
It's very good. It does have its downfalls and scalability issues. I would say if you have a small grow. Here's the thing, when you're dealing with chemistry, especially with things that are pesticides,
Huh.
things that kill things, they need to be EPA registered, number one. And always follow the label. If you follow the label, generally speaking, you as a consumer are going to be safe. Does that help?
well, they're following a label and it just sounds scary as hell. Like
It's supposed to sound scary.
the radiation guy has actually got nuclear material in it. You're supposed to register with.
That's not exactly accurate,
That
but
sounds like
if
so
you.
scary. It's the ball.
No, I mean, it's meant to be scary because it can be scary. Things can hurt you. That's the reality of this. So you always have to respect chemistry. Doesn't matter what it is. And the thing is, we're in farming, man. Like, so, I've got farmers going back, 8, 9 generations. Like, we were told glyphosate was a great product for a long time.
I don't know what that is.
It's a carcinogen. It killed a lot of people. Everybody told it was safe. So, you really got to pay attention to the label, how you use it, respect chemistry, and you gotta ask questions. And, in terms of the ozone thing and breathing it in, please don't do that ever again.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Would you agree? Okay, good. Yeah, good. All right. I think we have to open this to Q&A because we're done with my time. Thank you, everybody. I hope we have more conversation.
Thanks, Kyle, and thank all of our presenters for being here today. I'm going to move this microphone down to the floor. If you guys have any questions, if you guys could come up to the mic for anyone, for any of the presenters, for any of the testing lab, Department of Health, this is your opportunity to, express your concerns or questions. So please take this opportunity.
Thanks. I have a few questions, specifically for the people who've been talking about ozone and chlorine dioxide. Is there a safe level of ozone for humans for like a limited exposure, or is there something that, and the same goes for chlorine dioxide? Okay, so quite low. Okay.
So the question was, is there a safe level of chlorine dioxide or ozone in facilities, right? So I'm going to take a chlorine dioxide perspective. That's our expertise. We certainly have our opinions on ozone, as Carly knows. So when we're talking about a gas, there is no EPA definition or standard for sanitation or sterilization, which is a super high level of a gas. So there's no volumetric. So if we look in here today and we ask the question, how do we eliminate all the different microbes in here? There's no definition to do that gaseously, okay? The EPA came out and said that they're going to create a definition in the next 2 years. I'm not going to hold my breath for it. What we do is call things deodorizers, okay? So there are deodorizers, and what its capability is to reduce the volatile organic compounds in the air. So in the Northeast, we have things that are called host community agreements. It's where towns come in and say, if you are going to grow cannabis here, you have to have an odor mitigation strategy. We deploy chlorine dioxide gaseously below permissible exposure limits in order to reduce those CFUs, break down mycotoxins, and destroy contaminants. If a company is making a volumetric claim, they can't actually do it, nor can they prove it. The difference is this. You have device registrations, and the EPA defines a device as something I plug in. It creates something. Ozone is a device. And as long as you have evidence that says it does X, you can make that claim. My world's so different, it's not even funny. And it's so frustrating, it's crazy. Because I cannot say the same things that those companies are saying. I have to prove that it is killing something. So we are the only company in the country that does porous and non-porous surface definitional no-grow sterilization. Our organization, if you were to watch a documentary on anthrax, you'll see these little red trucks in front of the Capitol buildings, like the Hart Senate building. Our company was the ones responsible for its decontamination. We had to do that through the EPA. So when we're putting in gas in, to answer your question, it's 0.08 ppmv. That's parts per million volume.
And I'll make it a little more complicated. We have in ours over a time limit. So ours is over 8 hours of exposure, right? So from Colorado, we actually have high ozone days, right? Ozone is naturally occurring in our environment. So ozone, again, to your question, there are permissible limits for safety. Again, though, a little bit different than Clean Theory and Kyle. And gosh, I don't know if you guys know how amazing this is today, but you have a bunch of competing companies all here together playing nicely. And we often do, we're at conferences and stuff like that, working together, being on the stage together. This is awesome from a scientific perspective. I'm really honored to be here with everyone. What is different is that ours is in that closed contained unit. So none of that ozone is being exposed to the occupant of the room, and all of that ozone is going to be turned back into gaseous oxygen through a catalyst and then put back into the room. So there is no like safety limit for the user. We also have, again, the alarming system, detection inside, detection outside. We'd be happy to give you leak detection like detectors for even outside of that unit. I know X-ray, sometimes they wear badges that will change color if you're exposed to too much. So all of these devices are going to have their own safety features, either required by Mississippi when it comes to some of these radiation technologies. And then internally, we really just, with the understanding of ozone, we really just want to make sure the users are safe. No regulations by Mississippi, but we definitely go above and beyond to make sure that the users of it are safe. Again, we are enclosed in a contained system just for that final product, where I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, you guys are doing environmental. You're working in the facility. You are, putting chlorine dioxide in the environmental space of those plants, where we are working on that final product within the drum. And then I actually had a question, since I'm up here, to Alchemy. How often do you guys have your clients really asking about your non-detect numbers, asking if they can see their total yeast and mold plates, asking if they can see, their aerobic plates, to kind of investigate where that contamination might be coming from, getting more insight into their data?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Okay.
My name is Susie, and I'm the Director of Operations of Alchemy Analytics. To answer your question, we do not have a lot of clients that actually ask to see the plates. In fact, we do offer to show them some of the plates that we see growth on to try and explain what it would look like, how we count them, with explaining a little bit about how we actually do the tests. We have not had a lot of clients that have already started a lot of R&D testing. Very few clients have already acquired some of these technologies to start remediating or mitigating some of their samples. We did help with some R&D testing, before and after tests, not enough, of course, so far to actually see a specific trend. But we're happy to help anybody that needs to. But so far, I think we still need to put a lot of information out and educate growers and cultivators more and more about the different technologies out there, all the mitigation techniques, the durations, pros and cons of everything. But so far, we are trying to help with R&Ds as much as we can.
For the people in testing, is there any test been done as the cannabis is burning under heat in a bong, in a joint, or however it's being consumed, to know what the microbials are when it's actually being consumed under a hot temperature? And the reason I'm asking this question is because cannabis has been flowing across the Mexican border for 50 years, and I haven't heard anything about anybody getting sick from it. And that's basically for the last 35 years. It's all been smoked. So it really, what the processing and all that didn't pick up into the legalization markets about 20 years ago. So I was wondering if anybody had any test or anything conclusive on whether or not the actual burning of cannabis, even if it has microbials, even if it has molds, even if it has yeast, will it survive the heat that of burning when it's being consumed to an individual? Thank you.
All right, so probably didn't get into my background. I work with the Association of Food and Drug Officials on the Federal Products, Cannabis Products Committee. Great question. So one thing we do is pyrolysis testing. So if we remember, we used to use stuff called myclobutyl fungicide, which is really great at killing mold, by the way. I use it on my tomatoes. However, when you ignite it, it turns into hydrogen cyanide gas. Pretty bad, okay? They did other testing of mold, and this was also in tobacco, they did that. So let's talk about a bowl, right? So I have a convex shape and I have my cannabis piled on top of it, right? And let's say there's mold spores inside of that. When I ignite the top, I'm decarboxylizing the THCA and the THC that enters my lungs, etc. I'm actually not combusting and bringing that heat all the way down, am I? I have to spark that bowl several times in order to get it carbonized and return black. So if we were to look at a theoretical experiment, we can get into the studies in a second. If we have tiny spores or bacteria at the bottom of that bowl in conjunction with that cellulose material or the leaf material, as I'm pulling in, while we have heat on the top, there's a gradient, right? So as I'm breathing in those spores. So I'm only burning the top, right? Burning the top, but I'm breathing in the volume of that bowl. So the studies were actually showing things of histoplasmosis and aspergillosis, and there are current studies. Here's the weird thing. So from a medical perspective, I got some doctor friends, we're getting into psilocybin mushroom production stuff, so we've got to get stoned and have these conversations. Patients typically did not tell the doctor that they were smoking. So if they started to have lung issues, we've got all this history. I mean, think of this. 40 years ago, people died of consumption, right? So our modern modern understanding and diagnostics of understanding causality of disease is very current. And because we have cannabis as a very, very new infant kind of industry, we still don't have a lot of medical data that where patients said, I've been smoking XYZ and I have a problem. We're just now getting into that. We do have positively linked lung issues. There was just one that just came out where this dude had to get a part of his lung removed from aspergillosis because he was in the same strain conducted by qPCR. So they were able to understand what strain that mold was from, and they were to positively link that to a medical cannabis product. So it's happening, it's real. I would think that most healthy individuals probably just fine. I mean, I smoke cigarettes like an asshole. You know, I know those are gonna kill me. So, you know, from a recreation or adult use perspective, I think that there's some levity there. I go to the steakhouse, I order a raw steak, and what's at the bottom? Or not a raw steak, rare. What's at the bottom? The USDA does not recommend eating raw or uncooked fish. So I think there's room in there, but from a regulatory perspective, it takes time to understand risk reduction. Is that helpful? That's a different story, brother. Yeah, man. Yeah, but that's changing too. So check this out. Ole Miss just got that's got a significant investment from the state. I tell you what, let me get your email. I want you to ask that question to Ole Miss with the people in charge. Sound fair?
What do you say? It's just that everybody here.
So when you're talking about that, the mold, is it the mold that gets in your lungs that causes the problem, or the chemicals that the mold produces?
Give me both.
Because I know that when you have that, the contamination is not always what's there. It's what it produces.
So these are microbes.
Right.
So it can be both. So you can create a lung infection. So like pneumonia, for example, can be viral, can be bacterial, can be.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can have something like histoplasma. So a lot of chicken farmers do, right? It's growing mold, like molds, and
Right.
they bring that in, that mold starts to develop inside the lungs. Then you have different aspects. Anthrax, for example. Anthrax, for example, creates a toxin that'll kill you. Irreversible. So you have two effects. You have you can breathe mold spores in, it can begin to propagate and actually grow fungus, and then that creates other toxic byproducts. And then you also have toxic byproducts that you can breathe in and also have an adverse effect. So it's really twofold.
So when you go and you track that radiation or whatever way you do it, it's still there.
I do not believe irradiation or ozonation or radio frequency absolves ourselves of micro or endotoxins. Can the experts here discuss that? Yeah. So yeah. So I feel special today because every one of you guys mentioned prevention. Love that. It really is about prevention. You know, number one, I think that we're. Yeah, if you're reducing the amount of CFUs, colony forming units, mold, bacteria, viruses, viroids, then number one, it's less of a burden on the backside to say, do I need to remediate or not? I will tell you, our largest customers are MSOs. They are using remediation methodologies as an assurance policy, right? So we come in under the state parameters, and then they still are using these technologies to make absolutely 100% certain that their product's getting to market and it has long shelf life stability. But it is essential that you focus on preventative methodology. And frankly, you'll win in the end because one, you're going to have less turnover. You know, if you have a good environment to work in, less people are going to quit on you. Yield typically goes up. The plant's healthier. As a result of the plant being healthier, you're getting higher cannabinoids, higher THC, better yields. This is better to work, man. So I don't know if that's helpful, but. All right, sorry. Oh, absolutely. And zero doesn't exist.
Arthur, did you want to ask a question or did you want to make a statement or anything? I had, Steve, I have a question for Alchemy whenever it's my turn.
All right, so a lot of you may remember me. I used to be the CEO of Southern Sky Brands. So here's the reality of where we are. The reality where we are in Mississippi is a lot of you, this is going to really sound mean, so you have to hear me out. You're going to have to learn to do different business models. A lot of you came from the black market. This is not unique to Mississippi. This is where we are right now in Mississippi is very, very normal. And I've worked in every state. I've built a lot of facilities. And it is rare. I'm telling you, it's rare that two things. One, that you have an association like Henry and Ken and 3MA when they got all of these people in here to educate you. It's very rare to see that from an association. So thank you. The other thing is they actually we met with Laura at the health department and they brought the person that's in charge. And she is the biggest advocate for you guys. And I want to publicly say this. That is the absolute truth. You may not believe it and you may not even like it, but I'm telling you, that's one of your biggest heroes right there. She's fighting for you. The other thing that they're doing right now is the ABCs. You've seen me on video say this. The ABCs of running any facility, always be cleaning. Always be cleaning. And a lot of you don't even have SOPs. A lot of you don't know that you let your workers go out and smoke cigarettes or blunts or whatever it is, and they come back in. Tobacco has one of the largest conveyors of pathogens into cannabis. And if they're not washing their hands coming back in, if you don't have that written in your SOPs, I don't care what methodology you use, you're going to keep failing. So you're just going to have to learn to grow better. And I'm not beating you up. That is universal what happens in every state. So what I would suggest, we can break up or whatever else, but you've got a lot of these experts who have been doing this for a long time. Nobody's in a hurry. Y'all need to have conversations. Lastly, there's a guy sitting right back here. Andrew, if you will, stand up. Andrew Guy is probably the most world famous grower, guaranteed. He's grown more cannabis in America than anybody else that I know of. He was the head grower of Fat Panda. He was the head grower down at True Live. They hired him away. He knows his stuff. He is a consultant. I'm not here making any money on this. I'm just telling you about the resources that we came in. Andrew came with me. We went and met with Ole Miss. We came down and met with the health department because we're trying to support this industry. So that man right there is a wealth of knowledge on how to set these things up and help you with those things. And he's probably going to be doing some consulting with the state. You got inspectors that are here. Laura got her people here to hear all of this stuff too. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Laura, and the rest of the Department of Health. I did want to ask, I want to preface this by saying I'm not a laboratory expert. I'm also not a cultivator, but I have learned a lot about the process of remediation and mitigation, the process of yeast and mold, and testing for it. So one of the common questions that keep coming to me is, what is, in Alchemy Analytics, you can only speak for your own lab. There are 2 other licensed or operational laboratories in the state. What, in Alchemy Analytics experience, how large of a test sample are you taking for a for all of the panels that you run on cannabis? An average of 12 to 14 grams. And how much of that 12 or 14 grams is used to test for microbial specifically? 3 grams. Now, again, I want to say I'm no expert, but from the people that I've spoken to who are lab experts, they have recommended we increase that test sample size significantly, specifically for microbials. And there are other methods. Once a cultivator transfers product to a testing lab to ensure that the contamination doesn't occur outside of the cultivation facility, correct? So things like isolating that sample in a clean environment or a clean room before other test lab experts take their samples to run potency or moisture content, terpenes. Do you think, yeah, in your personal opinion or in the opinion of Alchemy Analytics, that there is room for improvement or change on the regulatory end to increase that sample size? Do you foresee, I mean, there's a lot of cultivators here, maybe they can answer. Would you guys be against increasing that sample size in order to have a more consistent or a higher chance of passing this total yeast and mold content test? Does anybody have anything for me? Again, I'm no lab expert, but
I cannot speak for what other labs do or prefer to do. We know that the minimum sample size per regulations is 7 grams in or 7.5 grams in 15 increments of half gram each. What we prefer to do is to take more because scientifically, the bigger your sample size, the more representative it is of your overall batch. And we already tried to take already a separate field duplicate sample. How we sample is simply when we talked to state and took their permission with that, is to take a separate smaller subsample, which is just the microbial sample in its own sterile bag that does not get sampled out of. It's not homogenized with the rest of the sample, so it's less contamination or less introduction of possible contaminants, less compromising of that sample as much as possible. And then the rest of the sample is also divided into a field duplicate that is taken on site in a separate bag. And then the overall rest of it is the sample, which would definitely exceed those 7 grams that are the minimum per state regulations. And that is what is homogenized, where we take the potency, terpenes, any other tests out of that bag, but the microbial separate small bag is taken on site with as much smaller increments as possible of the overall batch, so that it is as representative as possible. And then it's only opened in the sterile microbial room. That we have to
What happened to their audio?
Hey, your sound's off. We can't hear you online. Hey, Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, they probably have all of us muted.
No, we were muted before, but not now. So I don't know what's going on. Like I have my shit muted, but like we should still be able to hear it. Like, see, Ken's is muted. They hit something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I've been sending Henry so many damn texts.
Yeah.
I need a fucking joint. It's ridiculous.
Nuclear material on cannabis. Okay, so we can use some of these others that don't have nuclear material. I like that. No nukes, I'm Green Party. I was trying to think, is there just one company that was using nuclear material inside their machines?
So there's two companies here that are doing X-ray, and neither one of us have any nuclear materials. That's one of the reasons why we use X-ray. Nuclear materials would work, but there's some drawbacks to it. They have to give a much higher dose for different reasons. All of our technology is X-ray. It's just like a light. You turn it off, it's shut off. There's no nuclear materials. Just like this type of light, only it's X-ray is the wavelength of an X-ray.
I've got a friend that's works for the VA, and he does X-rays all day, and he has to wear a lead suit.
Yep,
So that's not nuclear material because he's got to wear a lead suit.
that's correct. It's not nuclear material. But the lead suit is to protect him, and we don't give that to the microbials. We put them in there and we hit them with X-rays and
So people who are using these machines have to wear lead suits.
no. The reason why is because we build them per 21 CFR 1020.40, very strict federal requirements, one of which is you can only have up to 500 micro R. Micro R is a unit of measure, 5 centimeters from the unit. I don't know about XR Pure, but I assume that they're very similar. Ours is, well, what I mean is we typically have 20 micro R or less. So, you know, we're allowed federally to have up to 500 and we have 20 or less, and backgrounds typically like 13, 14. And FYI, if you get on a plane in the middle of the day, you have an idea how much micro R you get per day or per hour?
Don't ride the plane.
Oh, well, 200 to 220. I've tested it a couple of times. I've taken out my radiation survey meter and you get about 200 to 220 micro R per hour just flying in the day, in the middle of the day. So it's more dangerous to fly in an airplane than it is to lean against one of our units. Again, I can't speak on his behalf, but I have to believe it's similar.
Thank you, Nathan. I think there was one question on Zoom that I wanted to ask. I'm just gonna repeat it back. This was from Mike Watkins. I'm sure most of you probably know who he is. His question was specifically about CFU count. So our laboratories in the state, and I guess Alchemy can only speak for Alchemy, but are laboratories differentiating between beneficial and harmful molds or yeasts within their tests? No, the answer is no. I was just gonna make sure I asked that question completely. So one of the members of the audience said there's also no way of differentiating between good and bad microbes. You kind of just have to kill it all. Oh,
Carly might be able to add to this too, because she used to run a lab, but when I worked for one of the companies I mentioned earlier, there is a way to identify good versus not good microbials. Only it's expensive. People don't want to pay for that. So one of the advantages of using technology that remediates or as a kill step is because then you can grow the way you want to. Obviously, we encourage you to grow as clean as possible, but then you still are able to sell the product as flower. So.
Thanks. I will add on that just a little bit. So And I'm gonna go way back to a previous question about increasing sample size. So in Colorado, a lot of times and in other states, it is 1 gram that is tested. And in a lot of these states, you have pass, fail, detect, non-detects. Your state doesn't have this yet. I'm looking into your future as you guys are moving quickly. In states where you have aspergillus testing, that is a pass-fail for pathogenic strains of aspergillus. So aspergillus is everywhere. I like to say that a lot, but not pathogenic strains, not your black mold, not the disease causing aspergillus. So this is, here comes go. So again, this is one of them. The total yeast and mold is not pathogenic, non-pathogenic. It is an indicator of cleanliness. It really indicates to the health department how clean your facility is, how clean the environment was, how clean was the water that you were feeding these plants. And so what we do in our partnerships a lot of times is work with the cultivators, and they say, I have a beneficial I want to use. And I say, okay, send it to me. I'm going to run it on aerobic bacteria plates. I'm going to run it on enterobacteria seed plates. I'm going to run it on whatever your state, biotolerant, gram negative, whatever your state is regulating, to make sure that the addition that you choose does not cause you to fail. So as long as what you're adding does not pop on the 3M Petrifilm that Alchemy is using, you are okay to use it. As long as it doesn't pop on the PCR technology that they are using, you're okay to use it. These things are not considered a health hazard by your regulatory body and are safe thus to use. Now, as these things change, we have to keep up with them. So this is why at Willow, we have this partnership through your lease program. Throughout your year, you get your scientific team and we work with you and your lab. We like to a lot of times say that we're like a triangle of support. A triangle is very, strong. And we work with your lab to better understand your inputs and your outputs. So before you say you want to add more sample, think about in the future, you might have these presence absence tests. And if you're testing 7 grams, it might be in that 7 grams. If you're only testing 1 gram, maybe it's not in that. So before you choose to increase your sample size, know that things like E. coli, salmonella, those will definitely be presence absence tests because those are very pathogenic and are regulated very strictly. And I did want to go back to quickly your comment about the smoking of product as well. Again, it's an indicator of cleanliness. I don't just smoke that product. I'm also a consumer. I grind that product in my house with my partner who might be immunocompromised. And if I'm grinding that product, I'm releasing those spores. I'm then rolling my joint. I'm then licking my fingers and that paper. And if there's E. coli present, I haven't even lit it yet. I might be consuming E. coli, salmonella, aspergillus, total yeast and mold, aerobic bacteria, enterobacteriaceae, all of these things. And so it's so much more than, okay, I'm going to burn this, and is it no longer an issue? We do look into pathogenicity of certain things. The total yeast and mold is really an indicator of growing conditions, and all of these things can really be particularly assessed when it comes to your inputs and your outputs. So that's what we're here for. Any other questions? You look like you're so close. Thanks.
If there are, again, keep making that same mistake. If there are no other questions, we're gonna conclude it. I'm encouraging all of our presenters to hang around for a little while in case somebody has any individual questions they'd like to ask you guys. I'm not sure how long the bartenders are gonna be here. I think we asked for the venue till 4. As long as they're open, please patronize them. And thank you all again for coming out on a Saturday. I know football was, you guys missed a lot of good football games, so thank y'all for coming.
Sounds good. See y'all later. Have a good afternoon,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody for
Thanks.
being here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.